What is happiness? Oh man, do you want happiness? Are you working for it? Or do you at least have the desire to find a path through which you can direct your efforts? Then you are fortunate. Here is a method for your consideration. After scrutinizing it, see if you are convinced that everlasting happiness can be obtained through this way. If this method appeals to you as sound, follow it. Put forth your best efforts and enjoy in full the fruit of your toil. Listen to this exposition of the unique path to perennial bliss, which clears all the doubts that have been created in your mind by the various scriptures. So sounds the divine horn of knowledge, Jananamursu, of Bhagavan Sri Ramana to the world. Listen, my dear maiden, the Sadguru who, because of his divine compassion, came on earth in the human form of Sri Ramana, is standing on the holy hill Annamalai, Arunachalam, and is sounding his divine horn of knowledge so loudly that even the heavens tremble and the real eye of all the people on earth opens. With this verse, wake you up so that you may know that he is protecting us from pitfalls and has taken us as his own. Therefore, wake up and see, and drink the nectar of his grace. Wake up, my child, never to sleep again. Sri Ramana Embavai, verse 6.15. Embavai is a poetic meter in Tamil. By tradition, saints sing songs of 20 verses in this meter, taking the standpoint of a lady waking up a young girl to take her bath before worshiping God. O man who is ceaselessly craving and toiling for happiness, crying, "Happiness, happiness, I want happiness." Do you at least know what happiness is? On many occasions in your life, you have experienced happiness in various forms, have you not? Now then, can you tell me what happiness is? Those experiences through the senses that are agreeable to your mind you term as happiness, and disagreeable ones as misery, do you not? This idea of yours about happiness and misery is wrong. That is why all the methods through which you have tried to obtain happiness and avoid misery have come to naught. Because the method was wrong, happiness untainted by misery has never been within your reach. Since we say that your idea of happiness and misery is wrong, is it not necessary first to explain why it is wrong and then to determine what happiness really is? Now listen. According to your idea, you should be happy when the objects for the satisfaction of the five senses are obtained, and miserable when they are not. But see, you are happy in your dreamless sleep. Not even a single experience through any of the five senses is present there, yet sleep is blissful to one and all. According to you, there ought to be only misery when the five senses are not working, but in fact, it is not so. Contrary to your belief, there is happiness when the five senses are not working, that is, in the absence of body consciousness. How do you account for this? You have to admit that happiness can be experienced even without the help of the five senses. Moreover, a man or woman who has heaped all those objects which satisfy the five senses, such as wealth, fine houses, clothes, tasty food, an agreeable wife or husband, children and relatives, which alone are the means for gaining happiness according to your idea, must be the happiest person in the world, while one who has none or few of these must be miserable. However, when we see the world, it is not so. Even the richest man has his own miseries. Sometimes he cannot even have a good night's sleep. The thicker the finger, the greater the swelling. In contrast to this, you find that the penniless laborer who toils all day long, eats but a morsel in the night, and later lies on the hard pavement, enjoys a sound sleep free of all worries. There is still a more important point to be noted here. In deep sleep, even the rich man is totally dissociated from his external sources of pleasure, and despite this dissociation, he is quite happy. Therefore, You must accept the fact that happiness is something which can shine even without the aid of the five senses. Furthermore, as happiness is experienced by you in deep sleep, where there is neither body consciousness nor awareness of the world, it follows that happiness must be within you and not outside. Now you clearly know that you were wrong all along in thinking that happiness comes from external objects. Every object in this world, including your own body, is extraneous to you, and that is why they are forgotten in deep sleep. Yet, since everyone experiences perfect happiness in that state, the only possible conclusion is that happiness does lie within you. The truth is that you yourself are happiness. Happiness is your true nature. You are not this body form. You are full and perfect bliss itself. We can reach this same conclusion through another way also. Listen, do you not like innumerable things? Just analyze each and everything which is dear to you. When you do, you will find that you love only those things from which you think you get happiness. Where there is happiness, there is love. This is the universal law, a law which has no exception. Now, in order to proceed according to this law, tell me which thing you love most. You will have to admit that you truly love yourself best, far more than you love your friends, relatives, wife or husband, children, father, mother, riches, and so on. You love them because you think that they contribute to your own happiness. If anything happens proving to you that they give happiness to someone else, instead of to yourself, your love for them will at once vanish. Therefore, it is clear that you love other things only because you love yourself. We hear some people saying, "My love is not for myself. I work in this world not for my own happiness, but for the welfare of other people. In fact, I live for others." To care only for my own happiness is selfishness. That is not my aim. My aim is the happiness of others. This is superficial talk, betraying a lack of sincere and serious analysis. People do not realize that every so-called selfless act which they do brings happiness only to themselves. Let us take the example of a man who is prepared to undergo, throughout his lifetime, all kinds of sufferings for his son just to maintain, educate, and keep him above needs and wants. In doing so, it is he alone who gets satisfaction from seeing the prosperity of his son. He worked for this satisfaction alone. Is not this satisfaction his own? Is not this self-satisfaction the driving force behind all his so-called selfless work? The former American President Abraham Lincoln once saved a pig by lifting it out of the mire in which it was caught, and while doing so, his body and clothes became very dirty. The onlookers asked him why he, the president of such a vast country, should dirty himself just to save a common pig. He replied, "I got involved in this action not so much to relieve the suffering of the pig, but to relieve myself from the suffering I experienced at the sight of the pig. I did this only for my own peace of mind." What Lincoln said then is the practical truth of the matter. It is only this self-satisfaction, one's own happiness, which is the hidden motive behind all kinds of selfless acts. This can in no way be denied. Just as the sacrifice made for the sake of my children and my relatives turns out to be selfishness because it is caused by the love towards oneself, so the love towards my own country, Desabhimana, and the love towards my own language, Bashabhimana, also turn out, in an indirect way, to be mere selfishness, because they are rooted in the love towards one's body as I, Dehabhimana. What must be noted here is the I which is inherent in the mind. He who rises saying, "I will sacrifice even my life so that my language may flourish," does so on account of his love towards himself. In the same manner, since even he who sacrifices his life for the sake of his country is aiming only for his own satisfaction, he also does so on account of self-love. There are some who boast of their broad internationalism in contrast to narrow nationalism. They may say, "I am not so selfish as to be concerned only for my country or my home. I want the whole world to be happy. My aim is not the benefit of any particular language or country." Is this not unselfishness? Yet even this belongs to the same category. This man also gets peace only when he sees the whole world in peace, and thus what he desires is his own peace or happiness. It is therefore clear that even this hero of so-called unselfishness has love for his own self. This indeed is self-love. Therefore, the law that everyone loves himself most is irrefutable. By our saying so, let not the reader come to the wrong conclusion that we support a vice, selfishness. Till now, the word selfishness has been wrongly used by people to denote a vice. Since the word self has been wrongly used to denote the body, selfishness has been considered to be a vice. But for the self-realized one, Atma Jnani, the true import of the word self is an experience in which the whole universe is known to be I. If we take his experience as the right verdict, it will be clear that selfishness is not a vice. That is, the correct definition of selflessness, altruism, which has been glorified by people throughout the ages, is only the selfishness of a jnani who knows everything to be himself. Only the Atma Jnani is truly unselfish. Of the three aspects, existence, consciousness bliss, Satchitananda, or Asti Bhati Priyam, which is our true nature, the bliss aspect shines in everyone as the love for self, Swatma Priyam. Therefore, there is no wonder in self-love, nor any wrong, but knowing self, the unlimited form of bliss, as a limited form, the small body, alone is the great wrong. That is why selfishness has been considered to be a vice. This scrutiny is made here only to prove that self-love, Swatma Priyam, is the supreme truth. To enlarge upon this subject would lead to too great an expansion of this book, and hence it will be dealt with in The Path of Sri Ramana, Part 2, where the opinion of Sri Bhagavan about service to the world, Lokaseva, and unselfish action, Nishkamya Karma, will be explained. Thus, you have to conclude that of all things, the dearest to you is yourself. According to these two conclusions, 1. That you're your dearest of all, and 2. That love can spring forth only towards happiness, it is clear that you must be eternal happiness, open parenthesis, paramasakam, itself. Where there is happiness, there is love. Since you love yourself best, you are eternal happiness itself. Thus, do we not once again come to the same conclusion? It is this happiness, your own nature, that was experienced by you in deep sleep. The reason for your happiness in deep sleep, even without the aid of your mind and its instruments, the five senses, is that happiness is your real nature. In fact, you yourself are happiness. Here you may ask, are not the experiences gained during the waking state, through the five senses, happiness? Scrutinize more deeply. You should investigate with a keen attention each one of your pleasurable experiences as to what changes take place within you at that time. Let us take an example. Suppose you want to eat a sweetmeat. As soon as this thought arises in you, you start working to acquire all the necessary ingredients for making that sweetmeat. You prepare it and start eating it. Now, happiness is experienced. If you analyze how this happiness is obtained, that is, if you watch the feeling of happiness that rises within you while eating, you will find that the thought waves which had risen out of the desire for the sweetmeat, I want a sweetmeat, and which had been raging so far cease. Now the thought waves cease, but only for a while. Hence, the happiness is also experienced only for a while. When the sweetmeat has been eaten, the thought waves rise up again, and so the happiness disappears. Some may argue, a sweetmeat is sweet. That is why it gives happiness, and not because of the cessation of thoughts. The reason for the happiness is the sweetness in the sweetmeat. But this is wrong. It is a conclusion lacking sufficient analysis. Let us see how. The tongue, the organ of taste, can only discern which thing has what taste. Sugar candy is sweet, neem is bitter, tamarind is sour, salt is salty, and so on. But it is only the mind that decides likes and dislikes. I want this taste and not that one. Though a thing is bitter, if the mind wants it, it will derive happiness even in that bitterness. Are there not some people who hate sweets and have a peculiar craving for bitter things? In the same manner, are there not some who relish dried fish, while others will run miles to escape from the very smell of it? Moreover, though one is eating the tastiest and choicest dish in the world, one's mind may be so engrossed at that time in some other thoughts that it is unable to create thoughts of desire for that tasty food, and consequently, one is unable either to know its taste or to derive happiness from it. Similarly, when the mind is centered elsewhere, one can eat even a tasteless dish without aversion. Further, when one is hungry and the desire for food is strong, one eats and happily relishes even the worst and most tasteless preparation. What can we infer from all this? It is not the taste, but only the thought waves of the mind, in the form of likes and dislikes, which account for one's happiness and misery. When the fire of a ravenous hunger is raging, even a stale gruel or a sour soup of wild rice flour will be relished as the best dish in the world. Therefore, it is not the nature of the sense object, but only the desire for it, which is the cause of happiness. Guru Vachaka Kovai, verse 583. Thus, if the thought wave that rises is one of dislike for a thing of a particular taste, the removal of that thing will calm down the thought wave, and thus the mind will subside. Hence, happiness, which is your real nature, is then revealed. If the thought wave is one of a liking for a thing of a particular taste, when you get that thing, the thought wave will calm down and the mind will subside. Hence, here again, happiness is revealed. Therefore, it will be clear to those who keenly observe that happiness is experienced only by quietening the thoughts which rise again and again. It does not matter whether a thing is sweet or bitter. The rising of thought waves in the form of likes and dislikes for things alone is sorrow, and their subsidence alone is happiness. That is all. Eating a sweetmeat concerns only the sense of taste. The same process described above also takes place in the case of the other four senses: touch, sight, smell, and hearing. In deep sleep, too, thoughts become quiescent temporarily. Hence, happiness is experienced. Waking is the rising of thoughts, that is, the rising of the first thought, I am this body. When waking comes, the happiness of deep sleep vanishes. What is to be inferred from this? Thoughts are the enemy of happiness. Happiness reigns when thoughts subside. In fact, thoughts are the veil that covers over the happiness. When this veil is removed, happiness is revealed. Since you yourself are happiness, all you have to do to enjoy your own innate happiness is to ward off all thoughts. So, understand this truth that the happiness enjoyed by you in deep sleep, on account of its thought-free nature, can also be enjoyed in a thought-free waking state. The mind runs outwards because of the ignorant outlook that happiness is derived from external objects. If the mind is thoroughly and firmly convinced, through the above scrutiny, that happiness is within, and that one's real nature is itself happiness, it will not then run outwards but towards oneself. In other words, it will remain still in self. This knowledge is sine qua non for effectively controlling the mind. When you eat a sweetmeat, the thought wave in the form of a liking for it subsides, and you enjoy the happiness already within you. Is it not so? However, not understanding that you enjoy only that happiness which is already within you, you delude yourself in thinking that it comes from the sweetmeat. That is why you make repeated efforts to acquire and eat more and more sweetmeats. But beyond a certain limit, sweetmeats become like poison, upsetting your stomach and making you sick. The same is the case with the other four sense pleasures. Listen to this story. A dog went to the cremation ground. It picked up a sharp piece of bone from which the flesh had been completely burned off and started munching it. The sharp edges of the bone pierced the dog's mouth in many places, and there was bleeding. The dog dropped it, but seeing blood smeared all over it, it thought that the blood was coming from the bone because of its ravenous munching. It licked the blood and again started chewing the bone even more ravenously, with the result that there were more wounds in its mouth and more bleeding. The foolish dog went on repeating this process of dropping the bone, licking the blood, and again chewing the bone. Little did that foolish dog realize that in fact the blood came from its own mouth and not from the bone. A foolish dog picked up a bone, bereft of flesh because 'twas burnt, masticated many a round till its mouth was filled with wounds, licked in praised the blood, its own. No thing on earth equals this bone. Guru Vachakakovai, verse 585. Similarly, when a man enjoys external objects, he only experiences a little of the happiness that is already within him. But on account of ignorance, he thinks that the happiness comes from the external objects, and thus he behaves like the dog in the story, exactly like the dog that munched the bone again and again. Throughout his life, man repeatedly searches for and accumulates external objects. What is the result of all this? Alas, untold heaps of misery, with a few iotas of pleasure in between, that is all. Indeed, all this is ignorance, otherwise called Maya. All the researches and efforts of mankind, from the Stone Age to the modern atomic age, in different fields of endeavor, be they intellectual, scientific, or social, are they not all similar to the efforts of the dog which untiringly munches the bone? Do not feel offended by this statement, which may seem to be a sweeping one, for when told without reserve, this is the plain truth. Tell me, what indeed has mankind done in the name of progress so far, other than improving and accumulating external objects for the satisfaction of the five senses? All the aforesaid human efforts are based upon nothing but the wrong assumption that happiness comes from external objects. Is there any difference between the dog which thinks that more blood will come out of the dry bone the more it is munched, and the man who thinks that humanity will be made increasingly happy by accumulating more and more external objects through the improvements of scientific and industrial progress? Certainly not. Thus, not knowing the right path for obtaining everlasting happiness, humanity has gone too far and is racing still further in the wrong direction. There is no wrong in man's love for happiness. It is his birthright. It is in fact the birthright of all living beings. Thus, happiness should be obtained and should never be suppressed. But do not toil to achieve objects of worldly pleasure, which give only an iota of fleeting happiness. Direct all your efforts only towards obtaining happiness in full. By desiring petty external objects, you get only a transient and limited happiness. Therefore, be not a person of petty desire. Be a person of full desire. Until perfect happiness is obtained, do not give up your efforts. Know the way to experience always and uninterruptedly that happiness, Ananda, which is you and which exists, Sat, and shines, Chit. within you as your real nature. This is the goal, supreme, Purushartha, the very purpose for which you were born.